Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game that was played in Title Tuesday yesterday between Dmitry, Andreikin and Magnus Carlsen. It's a very nice game. It's a 3-minute blitz game, but it teaches us a great value of the end game. But before we check that out, a lot of you have expressed the wish to see the secret games that were played on the beach between Magnus Carlsen and Hans Mock and Niemann. And if you're wondering how do we know what they played if they are secret, well, they were spied upon by none other than Anish. And here you can see a nice photo of the two of them playing, some children playing in the background, or maybe it's parents with a child, but okay. Here you can see that there's a position on the board, and it's very hard to make out what is actually happening. However, Anish, like I said, did spy on them. There you have it. Anish is looking at the position from the distance. He even posted this photo on Twitter. He's enjoying himself, under this white umbrella. And he was checking out the moves, and he was able to recreate two of the games from memory. Not the entire games, but just the opening and the important bits. So I'm going to share that with you. So thank you, Anish, for scavenging these games for us. Let's check it out, and then we are going to check out the actual game that was played in the Title Tuesday, as these games are only by a few moves. And also, I found that it was maybe quite an enjoyable repertoire with black if you guys want to use in your blitz and bullet games. It seems to have crushed hunts pretty easily. So if you guys want to use it, feel free to do so. So this is the first game that they showed. Hans played d4 and Magnus played pawn to d5, knight to c3, and now Magnus played this knight to c6 move, the so-called Van Geet opening, and as bishop to f4 was played, sort of going for some sort of a London system setup. Magnus just played e5, and he sacrificed a pawn, and after d captures on e5, Magnus played g5, and already you can see that this is not your everyday position. Bishop g3, and now pawn to d4, and if you put this position to any engine, they will just tell you that black is better. So if Magnus was able to get this from Hans, chances are you will be able to get a nice position in your own online adventure. So here Hans played knight to e4, and Magnus even played h5. Now he's threatening h4 to trap the bishop. So Hans played h4, and now bishop to f5, putting pressure on the knight, developing a piece, and now knight back to d2. Problem is, if you play knight captures on g5, then bishop b4 check, and white resigns. There's no move. The king is in check, you can't block with the queen, and if you play c3, just d captures on c3, and you even don't care about a queen trade. Captures still, pawn captures or c2 will be checkmate. Pretty scary position. So after bishop f5, knight to d2 was played. Now Magnus played the g4, and this is the end position that Anish showed, saying that Magnus won the game pretty easily, as it's very hard to get away from all of the pressure black is exerting. So this is the first game, and this is now the second game. Magnus again has the black pieces, and again he goes for some sort of a weird setup with knight to c6. Hans played d4, knight to c6, knight to c3, and now Magnus played knight to f6 with pawn to e4, transposing into the Nimzovich defense, and now pawn to d5, e5, and now knight to d7, sort of offering the d5 pawn, but this is a trick of the Nimzovich defense. If knight captures, then this very tricky knight to b8 move now attacks the knight. If the knight moves, then you pick up the d4 pawn, so black really neutralizes all of white's ideas. So instead, after knight d6, we have knight to f3, and now knight to b6. Now the pawn is nicely guarded. We have h3, and now pawn to h6. And there are a few games that reach this position, but after a3 by Hans, it is now, as of move 7, that we have a completely new game. Magnus played bishop f5. Now we have pawn to g4 attacking the bishop, bishop to h7, and now even pawn to e6. Trying to destroy Carlsen's pawn structure, but Magnus just captures. And after bishop to d3, Magnus just captures again, bishop captures, queen captures, and he plays e5, saying he does not care about queen to g6 check. But really, I mean, if you don't play this, e4 is coming. So queen to g6 check, king to d7 by Magnus, d captures on e5, and now pawn to e6, saying that my king is just very nicely safe here on on d7, b3 by Hans, trying to keep those knights at bay, and now queen to e8, offering a queen trade. Hans goes back. He would very much like to exploit the weak position of the black king, but now queen to f7 by Magnus, and here Magnus, as reported by Anish, said to Hans, you are worse, and sort of in a laughing fashion. And indeed, if you put this position to an engine, the engine will say that white is worse. And that's pretty much all the moves that Anish gives, saying that Magnus won this with black. For example, a game could continue if you castle bishop to e7. Now the rooks are coming to f8. You're going to put a lot of pressure on this knight. Let's say knight to e2. And after something like rook 8 to f8, even king to g2, defending the knight here, but now pawn to g5, and it is very, very hard to play this with white or even find a move. So very, very nicely done. So those are the two secret games played on the beach. I don't know if there were more of them. The two of them were shown. So big thanks to Anish Giri for revealing them to us. Very, very nicely done. Now on to the actual game that we have from yesterday's Title Tuesday, Dmitry Andreikin versus Magnus Carlsen. Let me just quickly switch this up. Just give me a few seconds. There we go. Hans will now magically turn into Dmitry Andreikin. There we go. All right. Takes a bit longer, but there we have it. All right. Nice. All right. So Dmitry Andreikin versus Magnus Carlsen from yesterday's Title Tuesday game. Like I said, it's very nice because the end game they reach is sort of an elementary end game, but they both have like 4 seconds on the clock, and it's possible for anyone to make a mistake in such a situation, as you'll see. So Andreikin has the white pieces. He opens with d4, d6 by Magnus with e4, and now g6. Magnus sticking with the modern defense, bishop to c4, knight to f6, we have queen to e2, and now knight to c6. We have knight to f3 and bishop to g4. So all fairly standard stuff. Knight c3, guarding the d4 pawn. We have e5 now by Magnus, and now pawn to b5, striking the knight, putting pressure on the center, as the knight is one of the defenders or the attackers of the center. And here, knight to d7. Interestingly, there is a game Mikael Tal played against Friedrich Olafsson in 1975 that Tal lost, where e captures on d4 was played. But here we have a different continuation, knight to d7. Magnus goes for a different move than Tal played, even though e captures on d4, the move Tal played is the top move recommended by the engine. Obviously, Magnus knows a bit more. And now d captures on e5. Again, interestingly, there is a position that Tal reached, this time with the white pieces against Milan Matulovic in Skopje, that ended in a draw from 1972, where d5 was played. Also a top move recommended by the engine, the one Tal played, but here we have d captures on e5, and now knight d captures on e5, knight b to d2, and now bishop to g7. So Magnus ready to castle here, h3, bishop back to d7, and now both players castle. So Andreikin castles, Magnus castles, and now knight captures on e5. Knight captures and pawn to f4, attacking the knight, and still, okay, if bishop captures on b5, you just recapture with the queen, nothing really happening there. So here pawn to a6 by Magnus, bishop captures on d7, knight captures, and now Andreikin waits no longer, he just advances the pawn to f5. And okay, there's no real threat here. You will get the open f file for your rook, but black is very happy with this. We have queen to e7 by Magnus, queen to f3, and now rook 8 to e8. We have pawn to g4 going all out against Magnus, bishop to h6, and now rook to f2. And this rook to f2 is quite a bad move by white, but it's not easy to take advantage of it. One way to do it is just plainly go g captures on f5. And now, believe it or not, Andreikin can resign, because if e captures on f5, then just bishop to e3, and you lose the exchange here. So obviously you can't play that. You really don't want to play g captures on f5, because then you open up the g file, king h8, rook g8 will be very scary. And well, if you play queen captures on f5, doesn't really matter, because bishop to e3 again wins the exchange. So this is just a very, very bad idea. But Magnus misses it. He plays d5, which is not a bad move. It's just not instant resigns like g captures on f5. And this is a 3-minute blitz game, let's not forget. So here pawn to f6 challenges challenges the queen, queen to d8, and now queen to g3. Knight captures on f6 by Magnus, and now pawn to e5. We have bishop captures on d2. You could also play knight to d7. Magnus goes for bishop captures on d2. We have rook captures on f6, bishop captures, rook captures, and now rook to e6, putting pressure on the rook, but also just preparing to double up on the e file. Rook c to f1, and now queen to e7, getting ready to capture on e5. So here Andreikin trades, captures, and now rook to f6. It's the only way to keep putting some pressure on Magnus, hoping that after captures, he can gobble up the c7 pawn. But Magnus says, nope, not gonna happen. Rook captures, pawn captures, and now just queen to c5 with check, not allowing the capture of this pawn. King to g2, and now the spectacular d4. It's a wonderful move because Magnus is preparing queen d5 check, and then once white deals with this, just push the pass pawn to victory. So here, of course, the pawn must be captured. C captures on d4, queen to c2 with check, and now king to f3. Problem is, okay, you could even offer a queen trade, but then just captures in g5, stopping white from defending the pawn on f6. Now you're just going to capture this pawn, be up a pawn, and hopefully win the game. But here we have king to f3, queen to d3 check, and now Andreikin goes back. King to g2. We have queen captures on g3, pretty much the same idea. King captures, and now pawn to g5. Now, of course, white cannot play g5 himself, and Magnus will win the f6 pawn. So pawn to h4, pawn to h6, captures, and now king to f3. We have king to f7, and now king to e4. So active king by Andreikin, but king captures on f6, and now very quickly you will see just how complicated and simple endgames are. Pawn to d5, and now Magnus just plays a5. Interestingly, a5, the only winning move for Magnus, amongst other things, it stops pawn to b4. We have pawn to a4 by Andreikin, and now we have pawn to e5. We have pawn to b3, just wasting all of the free pawn moves. Pawn to b6, and now king to d3. You can't really play anything else. All of the other pawn moves are now impossible. King e7. Magnus needs to put the king on d6. King back to e3. Of course, you can't play something like just king e4, because then king to d6 and you're out of move. So you have to keep triangulating. King to e3, and now if Magnus were to play king to d6, that would be a mistake. Then king e4, and Magnus is the one without a move. So Magnus, of course, knows this. He does, tend to play the endgame fairly well. King to d7, he continues the dance of kings, and now comes king to d3. And this is now a bit of a problem, because now Magnus can win this game, and he can win this game if he plays the only move that wins the game. So feel free to pause the video and try to win this game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on playing this spectacular pawn push. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to not c6, but rather pawn to c5. This is the move that wins the game. Okay, if you put the position to the engine, the engine will say also king e7 is winning, but only because you can repeat the position and then play pawn to c5. So here we have pawn to c5 as winning, but Magnus played pawn to c6. The problem is, after king to c5, white is really without a move, because now after king e4, you can simply play king to d6. Now white has to move, and you start gobbling up pawns. Or if you don't play this, if you play king to c4, you just don't care. King d6, and now even king b5 will be met with pawn to e4. And that's it. Now the pawn will promote to a queen, and that's it. If white goes back, it doesn't really matter. If king to c4, you just play king to d7. And now if this is covered, the king really has no squares here. If you go king back to c3, you can even play king to c7. And now if you go king to d2, king to d6, you can go here, but then king captures on d5, and now you're up one more pawn. Of course, now it's completely winning. So here, after king to d3, Magnus did not play c5. Magnus played c6, and now it's a completely different story, because now Andreikin just played king to e4, and now Magnus is the one without a move. And to make matters worse, he will not just he didn't just blunder his winning chances. He will now lose a pawn by force, because now how do you defend the pawn? If you play king d6, just d captures on c6, and after king captures on e5, and that's it. Now you're lost. King c5, king to f5, king to b3. You can play king g5, king captures on b3, king f6, and this pawn is now, of course, much faster. King captures on a4, g5, b5, g6, b4, g7, b3, and now, of course, queen b2, and now queen to a2. Check picks up the pawn and wins the game easily. So here Magnus tried to keep everything together. He could still play c captures on d5, for example, and after king captures on d5, it will be a draw. e4, king captures on e4, king e6, with a completely symmetrical position. Of course, now you can just repeat moves back and forth. There's no winning this. But Magnus obviously wanted to still win the unwinnable, and now he played c5, a move, after when he should have played it. But now just king captures on e5, and after b5, Andreikin just played a captures on b5, and he was in this position on move 45 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Now, whatever you play, let's say c4, you want to create a passed pawn. Okay, it doesn't matter. a4 looks very scary, but white just brings the king back, and the white king is in the square of the pawn. Of course, now there is no move. You are down 2 pawns, and the white king can easily reach the a4 pawn. It's not a problem. a3, king c3, a2, king b2, and that's it. So yeah, very nicely played by Magnus. Another very nice use of the Van Geet opening trend of the modern defense. He seems to really be putting very strong grandmasters in trouble, as no one knows how to handle it properly. So I think it might become very popular, and more players will be playing it online, especially in shorter time formats. So if you have half an hour in the day, do try and improve your skill against the modern defense. Chances are you will be meeting it quite more often. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by both of them, but in the end, okay, when Magnus pushed this c6 pawn to c6, both of them were like on 4 seconds on the clock or 5 seconds on the clock, but maybe it was even a mouse slip. I don't know, because it's very easy to drop your mouse. And I think out of all the players that play online chess, Magnus is the one with the most mouse slips. But I mean, okay, it's easy to make a mistake in the end game. Sometimes your brain just convinces you that this is something that it isn't. It happens to everyone, and obviously it can happen to everyone. So yeah, very nicely done by Andreikin. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope you enjoyed the 2 secret games played on the beach between Magnus and Hans. Like I said, really thought you guys might enjoy these. For example, this e5 idea against the London setup with g5 looks to be something that you can use in your online adventures. So yeah, and once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Anshuman Shukla, Henry Spraggins, Mr. Robert D. Crayon, Saurav Medrata, and Michael Ovens for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.